My name is Lisa Carter, and I used to believe in safe neighborhoods. I used to think that evil wore a mask, that danger announced itself with warning signs, and used to let my daughter walk 3 blocks home from her friend's house without a second thought. But I was wrong about everything. February 1st, 2024 started like any other Sunday. My 11-year-old daughter Emily had spent the weekend at her friend Jessica's house in our quiet town of Millbrook. You know the kind of place. White picket fences, kids riding bikes until dark, where the biggest crime is someone forgetting to return a borrowed lawnmower. Emily called me around 6 p.m., her voice bright and happy. "Mom, can I stay for dinner? Jessica's mom made spaghetti." "No, sweetheart. It's a school night. Come home now." I can still hear the slight disappointment in her voice. "Okay, Mom. Jessica's dad will drop me off at the corner like usual." "I love you, Emily. See you in 10 minutes. "Love you too, Mom." Those were the last words my daughter ever said to me. Emily was wearing her favorite pink sweater that day, the one with Angel written across the front in sparkly letters. She'd gotten it for her birthday just 2 months earlier and wore it constantly. I used to tease her about it. "You're gonna wear that thing out," I'd say. Now I wish she had. Jessica's father dropped Emily off at the corner at 6:15 p.m., just like always. It was a 3-block walk through our safe neighborhood. 3 blocks she'd walked dozens of times. 3 blocks that might as well have been 3,000 miles. By 6:30, I was watching out the window. Emily was usually home by then. 6:45 came and went. Then 7. That's when the fear started creeping in. That cold, primal terror that every mother knows. That voice in your head that whispers, "Something's wrong." I called her cell phone. Straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Emily. Leave me a message and I'll call you back." Her cheerful voice on that recording would later become torture. I searched the house thinking maybe she'd come in through the back door while I was in the bathroom. Maybe she was hiding, playing a joke. Maybe. But I knew. Mothers always know. At 7:15, I called my ex-husband, Robert. "Rob, is Emily with you?" "No, why would she be? Isn't she supposed to be home?" "She's not here. She should have been home an hour ago." The silence on the other end told me everything. He knew too. At 8:47 p.m., I made the call that would shatter my world. 911, what's your emergency?" "My daughter, she hasn't come home. Emily, she's only 11. She was walking from her friend's house and she never made it back." "Okay, ma'am. When was the last time you saw her?" "This afternoon, but she called me at 6. She was supposed to walk home. It's just 3 blocks. She's done it so many times." My voice was breaking. I could hear myself falling apart, but I couldn't stop it. "Ma'am, what's your daughter's name?" Emily Carter. She's 11 years old, blonde hair, about 4 feet tall. She's wearing a pink sweater that says Angel on it." Even as I said those words, part of me couldn't believe this was happening. This was the kind of thing you saw on the news, not something that happened to your family, not in Millbrook. Within an hour, our neighborhood was flooded with police officers, search dogs, and volunteers. Robert arrived, and we stood on our front lawn watching strangers search for our daughter. We weren't married anymore, but in that moment, our shared terror united us. "She's okay," he kept saying. "She probably went to another friend's house. She's okay." But I could see it in his eyes, the same dread that was eating me alive. Detective Sarah Kane approached us around 10 p.m. She was kind but professional, asking questions I couldn't focus on. "Miss Carter, I need you to think carefully. Did Emily seem upset about anything? Any problems at school? Anyone who might have been bothering her?" "No, nothing. Emily's happy. She gets good grades, has lots of friends. Everyone loves Emily." As I said those words, I realized I was already talking about her in past tense. The first night was endless. I sat by Emily's bedroom window, staring out at the searchlights moving through our neighborhood like fallen stars. Every time a car drove by, my heart would leap. Maybe it was Emily coming home. Maybe this nightmare was over. But dawn came, and Emily didn't. The second day brought more searchers, more questions, more hope slowly dying. Local news trucks appeared. Suddenly, our quiet street looked like a crime scene. Because it was. On February 3rd, Detective Kane called us to the police station. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept earlier. We found surveillance footage from a car wash along Emily's route. She said carefully, I need you to prepare. This is going to be difficult to watch. Nothing could have prepared me. The footage was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. There was Emily in her pink angel sweater, walking along the sidewalk like she owned the world. My brave, beautiful girl just living her life. Then he appeared. A man in a mechanic's uniform, tall, ordinary looking. Nothing about him screamed danger. He approached Emily and I watched my daughter stop and listen to him. She wasn't afraid. She was being polite, the way I'd taught her to be. That's what haunts me most. Emily trusted him because I'd raised her to be kind to strangers. In the video, he takes her arm gently, almost protectively, and leads her away from the camera. Emily goes willingly. She probably thought he was helping her, maybe offering directions or assistance. The time step read 6:23 p.m. My daughter had 4 minutes of life left when that footage was recorded. I screamed when the video ended, a sound I didn't know I could make, pure anguish ripping from my throat. Robert had to hold me up because my legs stopped working. Within hours of releasing that footage, the tips poured in. Everyone in America had seen Emily being led away by a stranger, and everyone wanted to help find her. But one tip changed everything. A woman named Patricia Harper called to say the man looked like her husband, David Harper. When Detective Kane showed me his photo, I stared into the face of the monster who'd stolen my daughter. He looked so normal, like someone you'd pass in the grocery store without a second glance. That's what evil looks like, I learned. It looks ordinary. David Harper was 38 years old, worked as a mechanic, had a criminal record involving drugs and violence. He'd recently been released from jail and was struggling with addiction. None of that mattered to Emily. She saw a man who seemed to need help, and she stopped to listen because I'd raised her to be compassionate. My parenting killed my daughter. On February 6th, Detective came to our house instead of calling. When I saw her face, I knew. We found Emily, she said softly. The relief lasted exactly 1 second before reality crashed down. She's behind St. Mary's Church. I'm so sorry, Lisa. She's gone. Robert collapsed in the hallway. I remember thinking how strange it was that I felt nothing, like my soul had just left my body. The pain would come later in waves that would nearly drown me, but at that moment, I felt empty. Emily had been brutally assaulted before her life was taken from her. My 11-year-old angel had suffered in ways I can't let myself imagine. David Harper was arrested that same day. The trial was a blur of legal proceedings and painful testimony. That surveillance footage played over and over in the courtroom. My daughter's last moments repeated like some horrible movie. I had to watch strangers dissect the worst moment of my life, turning Emily's death into evidence and exhibit. But when the jury returned with a guilty verdict, I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, no closure. Because Emily was still gone, and no verdict could bring her back. David Harper was sentenced to death. The judge called it justice. I called it meaningless. People tell me I'm strong. They say I'm brave for speaking about Emily's case, for advocating for missing children, for turning my tragedy into something meaningful. They're wrong. I'm not strong. I'm haunted. I'm haunted by that surveillance footage, by the image of my trusting daughter walking toward her death. I'm haunted by the what-ifs that never stop coming. What if I'd picked her up instead of letting her walk? What if I'd said yes to dinner at Jessica's house? What if I'd taught her to be suspicious instead of kind? Emily's case changed how we investigate missing children. That footage showed the world that evil doesn't always hide in shadows. Sometimes it walks in daylight, wearing a work uniform, looking perfectly ordinary. But all the technological advances in the world can't bring my daughter back. I share Emily's story not for sympathy, but as a warning, because I used to be just like you, A parent who thought bad things happened to other families. I lived in a bubble of safety that burst in 47 seconds of surveillance footage. Emily trusted a stranger because I'd taught her to be kind. She died because I'd raised her to see good in people. The very qualities that made her beautiful made her vulnerable. I don't want you to live in fear, but I want you to live in reality. Evil walks among us every day, disguised as ordinary people. It looks like mechanics and teachers and neighbors. It smiles and asks for help and preys on the kindness we teach our children. That surveillance footage captured more than Emily's abduction. It captured the moment my world ended. 47 seconds that destroyed everything I believed about safety, about trust, about the world my daughter lived in. Every time a child walks home alone, every time a stranger approaches with a smile and a question, Emily's story repeats itself because monsters don't announce themselves. They look normal. They seem helpful. They count on our children's kindness. My daughter Emily was 11 years old when she learned that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they have targets on their backs. Her story ended in tragedy, but her warning lives on in every parent who stays vigilant. Every child who learns that kindness must be balanced with caution. Every community that refuses to live in denial. Because the only thing standing between an ordinary walk home and becoming a victim is awareness, vigilance, and the terrible knowledge that evil doesn't always hide in shadows. Sometimes it walks in daylight, wearing a work uniform, counting on our children's trust. Don't let them be trusting. Don't let them be Emily. In memory of Emily and all the angels we've lost. Trust, but verify. Love, but protect. Hope, but stay vigilant.
My name's Daniel, and all I ever wanted was to work at Disney. It didn't matter if I was selling popcorn or cleaning restrooms. I just wanted the badge, the uniform, and the excuse to say I belonged there. When I finally got hired as a security guard, I thought I'd won the lottery. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like being part of something bigger. I told myself I'd make a career out of it, climb the ladder, and maybe even retire from here one day. My first week went by without much happening. The shifts were long, but I didn't care. Walking around the park at night when everything was empty felt surreal. The ride sat frozen, the music was gone, and only the sound of my boots echoed on the concrete. I used to stop and look at the castles and the statues, amazed at how different the park felt when no one was around. It was like being in a dream. The only thing that bothered me was how quickly the guard before me had quit. They didn't say why, not even the management. They just left their badge, uniform, and walked out. Everyone at the security office avoided talking about it, like they didn't want to admit something was off. I just ignored it. People quit jobs all the time. I wasn't going to let some rumor or unexplained resignation kill my excitement. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. One night I was doing my regular rounds. The castle area always gave me chills, mostly because of the giant Cinderella statue in the middle. During the day, it looked like something out of a fairy tale. But at night, under the dim lights, it had a different presence altogether. I forced myself not to stare at it for too long. I was almost past it when something made me stop. I couldn't explain why. It wasn't a noise or a shadow, it was just a tug, a pressure in my chest that told me to turn back. My flashlight beam cut across the statue and nothing seemed out of place. Her hands were folded, her head tilted gracefully. The stone smile was as perfect as always. I shook it off and continued walking. Still, the unease stayed with me. By the time I reached the end of my patrol path, I felt the urge to look back. I shouldn't have. Far in the distance, across the empty path, I saw someone moving. Slow, deliberate steps. The figure was wearing a long gown, pale blue, just like the Cinderella display. My legs froze as I watched her drift between the benches. I bolted back to my cubicle and grabbed the phone, but when I pressed the buttons, the line was dead. Not static, not ringing, just silence. My pulse hammered in my ears. I told myself it was some prank, maybe another worker messing with me, but my gut said otherwise. I picked up the flashlight again and forced myself back outside. The park was too quiet. Every sound I made echoed like it didn't belong. My light swept over the benches, the paths, the trash cans, but the figure was gone. My chest felt tighter with each step back toward the castle. When I got close, the Cinderella statue stood there just as before. At first glance, nothing was wrong, but when I focused, I realized something was different. Her head was tilted just slightly off from how I remembered. The stone chin wasn't facing forward anymore. It was turned toward me. I gripped the flashlight harder and stepped back. The sound of stone grinding reached me before I even processed it. Her head twisted the rest of the way, slowly, painfully, until her blank eyes lined up with mine. I froze in place, my throat closing. Then her arms moved. Fingers of stone, stiff and deliberate, lifted from her lap. The sound was unbearable, like bones snapping and joints breaking. Before I could move, those hands clamped around my throat. The weight crushed me instantly. My flashlight clattered to the ground as her grip tightened. I felt the edges of her stone fingers dig into my skin, tearing as I tried to pull them off. My lungs screamed for air. I kicked and slammed against her with everything I had. The statue didn't flinch, but one desperate kick hit hard against her leg, enough to make her stagger. She fell to the ground, but didn't shatter. The fingers twitched, loosened, and released me. I stumbled back, clutching my neck, gasping and choking on pain. She was still moving. Her hands scraped against the ground, twitching like they wanted to grab me again. I ran. Every step I took felt like I wasn't fast enough. I sprinted across the empty park, past benches and lampposts, but the silence was unbearable. I didn't hear footsteps behind me, yet I couldn't shake the feeling something was watching me. Then I noticed it. Every single display I passed, every statue, every animatronic was facing me. The ones that had been turned toward the rides, the ones frozen in rehearsed gestures for tourists. All of them had shifted. Mickey's hand was no longer waving outward. It was pointing straight at me. A group of stone dwarves were no longer smiling at each other. They were staring at me. I didn't dare slow down, but my legs felt weak. My lungs burned from the sprint. I cut corners, nearly tripping over steps, just to put distance between me and whatever was happening in the castle courtyard. The office was far, too far. I had left my phone, my bag, my badge behind. I didn't care. I just wanted out. I rushed to the main gates, praying they weren't locked. The gates didn't budge. My fists pounded on them until my skin stung. I pulled, shoved, kicked, but nothing worked. My heart sank when I realized I was trapped inside. I turned back, and in the far distance, across the empty walkway, the Cinderella statue was standing again. Not broken, not on the ground, just standing. Perfectly balanced, with her arms stretched forward like she was waiting. I forced myself to run again, cutting through different paths, trying to lose sight of her. My flashlight beam shook as I moved, the batteries already starting to fade. Every turn led me past another figure. Donald Duck with his beak twisted toward me, Goofy leaning forward like he was listening. Even the smaller characters, the chipmunks, were facing me now. The silence was broken by stone grinding behind me, heavy dragging steps that came closer every time I slowed down. I didn't dare look back, but the sound grew louder, closer, until it felt like the ground itself was moving with her weight. I ducked into a restroom building, slamming the door behind me. I crouched in the dark, pressing my back against the wall, fighting to keep my breath quiet. My chest rose and fell in sharp, painful bursts. For a moment I thought maybe I'd lost her. Then the grinding sound came again, right outside. I could see the handle of the restroom door shake once, slow, deliberate. Then again, harder. I backed into a stall, praying the door would hold. The shaking stopped. The silence stretched. I waited, frozen, for what felt like forever. Then I heard it. Inside the restroom. The sound of stone fingers brushing against the tile. I burst out of the stall and ran. She was there, crouched at the end of the room, her face twisted toward me, arms dragging along the floor. I shoved past her, the weight of stone grazing my shoulder hard enough to bruise. I didn't stop running. Through the park, past the staring figures, until I saw the employee exit near the parking lot. I rammed into it with everything I had. For the first time that night, a door gave way. I stumbled into the open air, sprinted across the lot, and didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the keys in. I left without looking back. I never went back to collect my things. The next morning, I called the office and told them I quit. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them what I saw, what happened with the statue. There was a pause on the other end. Then they offered me a compensation package for leaving quietly. They didn't even argue. They just wanted me gone. I didn't hesitate to accept. My husband passed away in a car crash when our daughter was just 6 months old. The terrible loss was so hard for me to take that I left California and moved near my parents in Maine. The move did help me look after my child better, but the loss was unbearable to cope with. Luckily, my husband had a successful business, which he had sold just before our daughter was born, so I didn't have to worry about finances. Nor was I in the mindset to think about anything other than my daughter and our grief at the moment. My parents had picked a beautiful duplex home for me and my daughter to settle in. It was just down the street from my childhood home. They thought that all the familiar faces and returning to a familiar environment would help me cope. But ever since we moved, I always felt like I was being watched. There was this creepy feeling in me that raised the hair on my neck. Sometimes when I was home alone with my baby, sometimes when I was grocery shopping, sometimes when I was in my parents' home, I never felt like I was truly alone. I tried to share this with our pastor. He was a kind man in his late 70s who had known me since I was a kid. He said that it was my late husband watching over us, but this felt different. This felt like something sinister, not like my loving husband, Greg. I tried to keep this to myself, not wanting to burden my parents with my irrational fears, till I got the letter. It was a postcard sent to me from California, and all it read was, "I am watching." I was so terrified when I received it in my mailbox that I grabbed my daughter and ran to my parents' home. I showed my father the card and told him all about the uneasiness I'd been feeling for months. My mother had tears in her eyes, and for a few days we thought it would be best if Emmy, my daughter, and I would move into my childhood bedroom. But even with my parents around, I still felt like I was being watched. We couldn't go to the cops as there was no evidence other than a postcard and my intuition to prove that someone was indeed stalking me. After a week of camping at my parents' house, I decided to move back to our own house. My daughter was growing up so fast that all my time was consumed by looking after her. But still, the feeling of being watched was constant. One Sunday, while I was at church with my parents and Emmy, I met an old school friend of mine. He had his own home security business. He noticed that I was disturbed, so I told him about the postcard and the stalking. He suggested that I install cameras in and around my home. I told him I would ponder over his suggestion, but I really didn't wish to compromise my privacy. A few weeks later, I woke up to another letter in my mailbox. It was again a postcard sent from the same address, and it read, "I watch you and little Emmy every day." Along with that, I also spotted footprints in the snow all around my house. This truly terrified me. That was the first time I had a panic attack, and that evening we went to the cops. But based on the evidence, the cops couldn't do much. That day, I finally decided to install the cameras in and around my house. Every night before going to bed, I would check the footage recorded during the day in hopes of catching my stalker, but I never saw anyone. But everything changed one morning. As I woke up and stepped down from my bed, I noticed that the window, which I always kept shut, was open. I immediately checked my daughter's crib, and she was there, fussy as usual, looking up at me. All the things in the room were in their place, but the cool air seeping in from the window chilled me in more ways than one. I rushed downstairs with Emmy in my arms and checked the whole house. Nothing was amiss. All the doors and windows were locked, and I just sat on the couch feeling defeated. To anyone looking at my life, it would seem normal. Just a widow and a new mom, paranoid over her situation. But I knew, deep in my bones, that someone was stalking me, keeping an eye on me and my daughter with malicious intent. I checked all the CCTVs around the house and found nothing suspicious. Finally, when it was around afternoon and I was in my room feeding Emmy, I remembered the small nanny cam I had installed in our bedroom. With chills running down my spine, I checked the footage of the last night, and my breath stuck in my throat. A man was in our bedroom. He looked at my sleeping baby in her crib. Then he moved towards the window and opened it. But what he did later truly rooted me to my spot. He walked up to my bed, where I was fast asleep, and began touching his privates. It was so horrifying and disturbing that I called my parents over, and I also called the cops. When the cops studied the recorded footage, they had me go to the station. They zoomed in and sharpened the man's face, and the second I saw it, I gasped. It was Ryan Cardoza, my husband's business partner. That's when the wheels in my head began to turn. Ryan was a decade younger than Greg, and they were both partners in a business they started around 2 years ago, right after our marriage. However, Ryan didn't want to spend so much time tied to a desk, and he didn't want to expand the business, so he sold his shares to Greg. However, a year after that, a big company wanted to acquire the business for a large sum, enough money to fund a good life for us and Emmy. Greg wanted to focus on us, so he took the deal. Through the grapevine, Ryan got to know about the acquisition, and he stormed back into our lives demanding his share of the profit. Greg quickly got his lawyers involved, as Ryan's claim had no basis, and before they could end their argument properly, Greg died. I now know Ryan was here to torment me and my baby. My parents helped me get a restraining order, but a warrant was issued for Ryan Cardoza. He had trespassing, stalking, and misdemeanor charges pressed against him. Soon after this, a local news channel picked up the story, and Ryan's face, along with the nanny cam footage, was all over the internet and news. A month later, Ryan was arrested. He didn't just confess to stalking me and my baby, but he also told the cops that he staged Greg's accident. Greg was stolen from me and our baby by this despicable man. He was given 75 years in prison. My nightmare was finally over. But can anyone ever recover from something like that.